And I'm going to invite people to share their video, at least to say hello to everybody. And then once the session begins, if you need to turn your video off, that's fine. But just so we can get a chance to see your smiling faces, this would be a very nice thing to do. So welcome. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. A couple things about setting up yourself in. I'm going to ask you to rename yourself and add your full name, first name and last name, as well as the pronouns that you prefer. So Ezra and I have added our pronouns, and if you could add in your pronouns as well, that would be great.
Rabbi, I don't see the three dots you're speaking about.
Oh, bring your cursor over to your image, Ellen, and you'll see two blue squares, one that says mute and one that says three dots. Click on that, and then you can function.
Rename.
If you have any tech questions or Zoom functionality questions, feel free to ask them out loud or put them in the chat. Rabbi Michael Ross knows a lot about Zoom. I am also here as kind of a Zoom support manager, so I've got your back.
Yeah.
Hey, Joyous, good to see you.
Hey, Rabbi, good to see you. Wendy's going to be on a different line just in case there's participation or whatever. So
That's okay. That's
hopefully we're not going to interfere with each other. If we do, then she'll come with on mine or vice versa.
Most of the time we're going to be muted when we're just doing the big group stuff. And then when we're in small breakout rooms, then we can take ourselves off mute and share stuff that way.
Sounds good. All right. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
I've already learned something just by reading the passages.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, the books are really great. These are going to be worthwhile books for folks to dive into. Hey, yeah. Cheryl, good to see you. Like a giant reunion. This is amazing.
Hey, Julie, do I see you on?
You do. Hi.
Hey, hi, how are you?
I'm nice and snowed in over here.
All right. Well, Wendy is on a different line, so she may not be on yet.
Okay.
Good to have you with us.
Thanks. And I ordered my books, but I didn't get them in time. So I just signed up yesterday.
All right, good.
So just a reminder, as people are landing in the Zoom room, when you come on into the room, rename the yourself so that your name is correct and you add in your pronouns so that we can all know the correct pronoun usage. So go ahead and do that as you're getting yourself situated in this space today.
Rabbi. How does one do that?
Oh, let me question. When you put your cursor over your screen, you'll see two blue boxes. One is your mute box, the blue dots, a blue box with three white dots. Click on the three white dots and you'll see the prompt to rename yourself. Hey, David. How are you? Good to see you. Hey, Terry.
Hi.
Alex, great seeing you. Good seeing you. Oh, this is really wonderful.
Yes, it is very wonderful. That's a good word for it. Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me make them bigger. Or not. There we go.
There you go.
Welcome, everybody. I'm going to get us started because we're a large group and folks are going to continue to trickle in. I think it's just better to start on time and let people join in as they can. So I'm going to ask us all first thing to mute ourselves. Ezra and I will kind of be the ones, you'll have opportunities to off mute later on, but just so that we don't have any get us started. When we start every class each week, we're going to start with a song because there's so many melodies that we kind of use to kind of help guide us in our Jewish identities that Ezra or I will be just giving you a melody to learn. And then the trick about doing this on Zoom is you should first learn the melody, and even while you're on mute, you should sing along with me. This first melody has no words. I'm going to be using the words Haida. You can use la 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 or da da da, but Haida is the word I'm going to use. Haida means nothing other than la la la. So this is a nigun, which is a wordless melody. And for those of you who know me well, I've got a 10-year-old son. When my 10-year-old son was a tiny baby, this was the nigun I would sing to him when I was trying to get him back to sleep. So listen first, and then we'll try and sing it together. Haida, 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 haida. Haida, 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 haida. That's the opening part. Then the second part, after you repeat the opening line twice, goes like this. It goes up a little bit. Haida, 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 haida. Repeat that. Haida. Haida, 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 haida. Okay, that's the whole melody. It's really simple. The most important part of this melody is to sing along with me and to feel like you're learning this new song together. So from the top. Haida, 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 haida. Haida, 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 haida. Second part. Haida, 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 haida. One more time all together. Haida, 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 haida. Haida, 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 haida. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us in our Judaism 101 class. I am so excited to see everybody. And this is a very special welcome because the Jewish world has been on edge for the past week. And for me yesterday morning for Torah study, we talked about how challenging, how traumatizing this week has been. So to come together and to study the basis of Judaism and the text and the meaning and dedicate ourselves to knowing a little bit more about Judaism, it is perhaps the single most important thing that we can do in response to what happened last Saturday. So I'm so thrilled that we are coming together as a group to begin this learning. A couple words of introduction, and then we're going to break up into 2 breakout rooms and share our own quick motivations for joining this class. So first, let me start with myself. I'm Rabbi Michael Ross. I'm a Reconstructionist rabbi. I was ordained in 2010. I have been here in Hudson this is now my 4th year in Hudson at Temple Beth Shalom. I work on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, primarily with TBS. During the week, Monday through Friday morning, I am at Hillel at Kent State. We've got a number of Hillel folks joining us as I'm seeing them come into the room. We've also got a number of other Hillel folks. So we've got 2 specific groups of people. We've got our TBS members and a number of Hillel folks. We've also got conversion candidates, people interested in learning more about nice mix. And you can already see just by the faces in the room, it's a very intergenerational gathering. We've got young folks, we've got folks in the middle, we got elders, and so it's just a lovely, lovely blend. Okay, Ezra, why don't you take yourself off mute and do a quick intro as well?
Hello, I am Ezra. I am the Zoom support staff / Zoom stage manager for this course. When we're all on Zoom, I'll be here. When half of us are on Zoom, when hopefully we are able to switch to in person, I will still be here on Zoom facilitating. I'm a junior at Kent State. I'm very involved in Hillel. Personally, I'm majoring in LGBT religious studies. So I've been around in the Hillel Judaism world a lot. I am Jewish myself. And this was my role last year. If any of you were part of this course last year, I believe I recognize Amy McCormick. And so I'm really happy to be here and fulfilling this role again.
So welcome, Ezra. Now, the important thing that Ezra is going to do is when you guys want to respond, ask questions, post things in the chat, you can do that. And Ezra will kind of gather the chat room information for me. So when I get off on a tangent and go crazy thinking about these thoughts or handouts I'm going to do, I'll then circle back to Ezra and say, so what kind of questions do we have in the chat? You guys can always be interacting with Ezra and doing that kind of stuff. And Ezra's primary job, besides keeping me sane, is going to be to monitor the chat to make sure all of your thoughts, questions, or concerns are raised. So if there's audio problems or video problems, whatever you are finding is a question, raise it up to Ezra and we can kind of try and deal with that as well. I saw the question about Reconstructionist Judaism. I'll get to that later. I don't want to do that just yet, but I'll get there. One quick thing about Zoom, and we're going to hit this note sooner rather than later. We're a largish group. I think we're going to be about 30 or so screens when everyone's here. I'm not sure when everyone's going to be here. So that means that when we go beyond 25, we're going to be on 2 sets of screens. So something you need to know about using Zoom. For those of you that want to turn your video off, you will drop to the bottom of the list and the video people are going to migrate to the top. So it's a nice way to hide if you're shy. It's also a way to get out of the teacher's perspective, because I won't be able to see if you raise your hand, or Ezra won't be able to track you. So just be aware, once we go beyond 25, we're going to be using 2 screens, and Ezra is going to have to dance around and not just track all of our 25 faces on this one screen, but then if there are more people, Ezra can toggle between the other folks. Okay, enough about me, enough about Ezra. I'm going to now ask Ezra to set up 2 breakout rooms, and they're going to put me in one as the facilitator, and Ezra, put yourself in the other. And when you go to your breakout room, the question we are going to be asking you is, what motivated you to connect and join this class? And we're going to take about 8 minutes, about 7 minutes. We'll go for 7 minutes. We'll be in the 2 groups, and then we'll try and come back together.
Breakout rooms are open. There should be a little button that you can press that'll take you right there.
Okay. Ezra, I'll join. Let's see, let me just take a quick glance at who's in which. Doesn't matter. I'll join room 1 for now.
All right, I got room 2.
Great, thank you. Welcome back to the main room. I hope everyone had a chance to at least share a couple quick thoughts and introduce themselves. We will get a chance to meet each other slowly over the course of weeks. We're a largest group, but I think you'll get a chance to kind of connect with each other. We're going to every session have a little bit of time in breakout rooms, small group settings of 3s and 4s. And over the course of the weeks, we'll get a chance to meet each other and connect. So thank you for sharing a few of your thoughts. Just take a peek. I'm going to call up the syllabus very quickly, and we're going to take a quick walk through that just to kind of get that set up. Let me share my screen for that. Okay. So you can read over the goals and the hopes, and the required books is the most important part I want to speak about now. We've got 4 books that I would like you to all purchase. They're paperbacks. They're small. Well, they're paperbacks. This is kind of our primary text. There's 2 editions of this. The first one is a hardback. The second is a paperback. The second edition is a little bit more expanded, a little bit updated. And so try and get the second edition of Essential Judaism. That's George Robinson's journalistic take on everything you need to know about Judaism. It's very comprehensive. And as a journalist, it's a little bit detail oriented, not so rich, not so juicy, but just good basic ideas to kind of move us through. So that's one text. The second text we're going to be looking at, which is really, I think, one closer to my heart, is A Book of Life by Michael Strassfeld. Rabbi Michael Strassfeld was the rabbi of the Society for the Advancement of Judaism in Manhattan. An amazing rabbi. This is the guy who wrote the Jewish Catalog back in the early 80s, I guess. A terrific writer. And so these are going to be kind of like the books that we'll spend a lot of time moving through. If you want to take the deeper dive into this reading stuff, you know, this is like your 15 minutes, if you only have 15 minutes to do, kind of do the Robinson stuff. Strassfeld is a little bit longer to take. So if you've got a half hour, 45 minutes, he will take you on a more interesting story ride. And he will complement Robinson's materials quite well. The other 2 books are very small. Night by Elie Wiesel. When we get to the Holocaust, it's a quick read. It's about 100 pages. It's just an important book to begin thinking about the Holocaust from a first-person perspective. And then the last book is Finding God. This is by Rifat Sensino. It's a book about Jewish theology, different ideas about God from a variety of different perspectives. And so we'll spend a couple weeks with Sensino's Finding God. Optional books here, we'll kind of talk about these at different times. But what I want to do now is move beyond our resources and get us to this class schedule. Week we've got like a topic to kind of organize our reading and organize our discussions. For many of the readings, the readings are already set up there, so it's gonna be pretty easy to track along. This also means if you miss a class for whatever reason, you can read along with the class. At the end of every session, Ezra will be posting the video of this class on a YouTube channel. So probably later tonight or maybe tomorrow, Ezra will send us all an email with the link in case you need to access the video recording of this. And that's just a good thing to know that, hey, you can miss a Sunday afternoon class and catch it up sometime, pick it up Monday morning and pick it up if you need to. Many of these are organized in a historical lens, but there are some specific topics that I think we're going to have fun exploring. A couple dates that I want you to see, just because we are going to have a bit of a change in the sense that we're going to meet every week through February and March. And then when we get to April, we will skip over the week of Easter. So I think we've got, is that right? Yeah, April 17th is Easter Sunday. It's also the beginning of the Passover holiday. So we'll skip April 17th. There won't be any class that day. There will be readings. You'll be have a chance to read about the Holocaust on that day, but we'll skip the actual session. The other thing I want to bring up is at the end, we will have, God willing, a Shabbat dinner together. So the first Friday in June in Hudson, I am inviting everyone to join us for a catered Shabbat dinner. We have put in for a grant, and hopefully that will pay for the food that evening. The first hour will be kind of like a class reunion where we'll get to eat together and talk about Shabbat together. The second hour, for those who want to stay, will be a Shabbat service with the Temple Beth Shalom community. What is really beautiful about the timing here is it's the night before Shavuot. So we're going to have some of last year's Judaism 101 folks who have moved through the conversion process, hopefully join us for dinner that night and talk about how the conversion process is ending for them, because the hope is that they'll both be finishing their conversion in May. And so they'll be able to talk about what it's like once the process is over. Okay. Any questions about the syllabus? Just to kind of get us, anything cropping up around the syllabus? Jody, I see a hand. Go ahead. Jody Byrne. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
That was
if
my
that wasn't me, I must have bumped a button.
Nope, that was actually my hand on mine. It was just on your face. Okay, so we've gone through the syllabus, and now we are going to kind of dive into this week's topic, which is Torah. It is perhaps the most important thing you can learn about Judaism as a starting point, is how focused we are on this word Torah. The Hebrew word Torah means teaching. It also means law. And so Ezra is going to share in a few moments images about the Torah scroll as I talk about what this Torah is. So from the lens of the Hebrew Bible, the first 5 books of Moses are considered the Torah: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And what you need to know about those 5 books is there's a curriculum in place. Every Jewish community begins reading the beginning of each of those 5 books back in October at the holiday of Simchat Torah. And every weekend on Shabbat, on Friday night or Saturday morning, they read the next section. Now, different groups might read different parts, but they're all reading in that same structured way to make it through all of the 5 books every year. So what we can begin to see is having a relationship to these 5 books is a deeply important part of Jewish identity. Let me speak about Jewish identity for a second before I even dive deeper into Torah. From the lens of Christian identity, it's probably best to start here. Many Christians identify themselves by what they believe in. If you believe in Jesus, you might go to church. If you believe in a certain approach to Jesus, you might go to a specific church. For Jewish identity, belief is optional. Some believe, some don't. The famous joke that I repeat over and over again is Schwartz goes to synagogue to talk to God. Levy goes to synagogue to talk to Schwartz. Both are true. Both Levy and Schwartz are getting a lot out of synagogue. One's there to, pray his prayers. The other there is to talk with her friend. And so what we can begin to see is that from the Jewish lens of doing Jewish identity formation, God is optional. If you do God, great. If you don't do God, okay, come on in anyway. That's a little bit new for Christian folk, right? Because why would someone go to church if they don't do Jesus? in Jewish communities, we welcome in atheists, we welcome in agnostics. We say, hey, be part of our community. We will celebrate you as well. And we won't question your beliefs ever. So let's dive into the Torah a little bit. A couple things
Rabbi.
about yeah, go ahead, David.
So Moses is supposed to have written these books?
That's a lovely way to kind of talk about how Jews think about these 5 books of Moses. If we were in an Orthodox setting, if this was an Orthodox Judaism 101 class, the answer to David's question would be yes, Moses wrote the 5 books of Moses, all you need to know. And I'm coming here to say, yeah, there's more to it than that. Moses didn't write any of the 5 books of Moses. He died centuries before these writings were taken down. Maybe his students kept the stories going and maybe they told their students, possibly. Where I want to posit as a non-Orthodox perspective to the Torah is these are human writers writing maybe with divine inspiration about what happened to the group of Jews as they're traveling through their journeys. And that makes it a human document, a divinely inspired human document, but a human document nevertheless. So David, that's a great question to kind of bifurcate how liberal Jews approach the Torah differently than Orthodox Jews. One more piece of this though, because both groups do approach the Torah from the lens of questioning the text. Christians tend to look at the Hebrew Bible, or what they call the Old Testament, through the lens of devotion. They worship the text. It's God's word. They want to be closer to that word, and they want to devote themselves to that experience. For Jews who come to my Torah study on Saturday mornings, we're there to question the text. The name Israel means the one who wrestles with God. We're going to wrestle with this text. We're going to find, how did it mean to the original writer? How did it mean to people 1,000 years later? How does it come to mean to us today? And I think that wrestling, that engagement would be a big part of how we challenge the text to speak to us. I saw the question about, is God optional for Orthodox Jews? I would say not so much. Orthodox Jews tend to be believing folks more often than not. If folks are agnostics or atheists, they tend to drift out of Orthodox communities into conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist communities. That's a stereotype. There are certainly some atheists hanging out in Orthodox synagogues, but primarily the Orthodox community is filled with believers. It's a fair, I think, a generalization. David, I'm going to ask you to hold your question. We'll have time for questions at the end. We'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A, but hold your question and ask questions in a moment. Okay. I want to share a couple videos or a couple pictures with you from some pictures we took at Temple Beth Shalom. So if we were in synagogue today, I would take you on a little tour of the building, and I would show you our sanctuary. I would show you our ark and our special stained glass windows. And we'd have this lovely experience of like looking and seeing what is unique and interesting about a Jewish synagogue. But let me pull up my photos. They are, there they are. So we're going to here, share my screen. So thumbs up if you can see the pictures on your screen. Oops.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is from Simchat Torah a couple years ago. Simchat Torah means the joy of the Torah. And you can see we unrolled the Torah on people's legs and laps in the middle of our community. Let me kind of highlight a couple images here. So here we see, this is our bima. That's my wife, Rabbi Rachel Brown, with some of our students, including my son, Gabriel. Here in the middle, Drew has the scroll in his arms. These scrolls are handwritten. It takes a scribe 1 year to write these scrolls. The scroll has to be perfect. And so you can imagine a year's wages, these scrolls cost quite a bit of money. Usually they're $20,000 to $50,000. We unveil the scroll, we roll it out, we take a gander at the different sections. And Simchat Torah is this amazing experience of engaging the scroll in person. Now, what some of us might remember at Simchat Torah at Temple Beth Shalom this year, we offered everyone a chance to come up and have an aliyah, an honor close to the Torah. Whether you were Jewish or not Jewish, everyone got an honor that night. The other thing I want to say about the scroll itself is if you were to look at the letters on the scroll, you would notice that there's no vowels. Hebrew is a consonantal language. So when you pick up an Israeli newspaper, you're only picking up the consonants. You're not seeing the dots and dashes like you might when you pick up our prayer book, which means that reading the Torah is a little challenging. You don't have the vowels to vocalize. You have to memorize those vowels or bring the vowels with you on a separate sheet. The ancient tradition of reading this in a perfect manner each week is a way to reimagine the Jewish community thinking about Mount Sinai, where Moses delivers the 10 commandments to the Israelites. When we have a Torah service, we are reenacting that drama, bringing the scroll into our arms, reading from it carefully, talking about it, then putting it away with love and respect. Okay, any quick questions about the Torah as an object? David, go ahead.
Well, is the 5 books of Moses the same as the Old Testament?
No, good question. The Old Testament is, so think about the 5 books of Moses as part 1, that's the Torah. Part 2 is the prophets. Part 3 is the writings. Next week, we'll expand from the Torah to look at the other 2 sections, the prophets and the writings. Today, we're focusing in only on this first third called the 5 books of Moses.
And that's part of the Old Testament, but it's not the Old Testament.
Correct. The Old Testament is all of 24 books from all 3 sections. Now, a bit of language. I don't ever call the Old Testament, I call it the Hebrew Bible. The Old Testament means it's secondary to the New Testament. It's not secondary.
Okay.
In my mind, it's primary, and it never should be considered secondary to anything. It is the most important writing that we can engage in. And that's why we engage it in the language it was written in. We do translate it, but we're always doing the Hebrew alongside the English to say, if we're trying to understand the words on the page, we should engage in the Hebrew words themselves. Okay.
There's a question in the chat related specifically to Torahs, which is what material is used to create a Torah?
Wonderful. So it's on animal skin. I believe ours is from sheep, but it can be from sheep or cows or lamb. And Ezra is sharing a couple images of the scroll itself. All of these scrolls are written on animal skins. Now you also see the wooden rollers for the scrolls. The wooden rollers are made of wood, so it's all natural ingredients. There's no plastic, there's no artificial ingredients here. It's wood and animal skin. It is sewn together with animal gut. The different sheets are sewn with animal gut to keep them connected. Okay. Ezra, thank you for getting us a couple quick images. Len, quick one, go ahead.
You already answered part of it, which was how it was sewn together with animal gut. But you didn't mention when they make a mistake, they just take out that one section, right, and rewrite it.
Correct, correct. So
And that could be many pages.
what's that?
That could be many pages. At one
No, the section itself is about, I would say it's about a 2-foot square. So you would take that 2-foot square out and make any adjustment you made. The letters are written in a special ink that is also a natural ingredient. And so if the letters are chipping or off, sometimes they have to go back in and rewrite the letters.
I assume it's with a quill.
Yeah, with a quill. It's
And
done.
that redo of a section probably takes about 2 days.
Yeah, maybe. Depends on how much work has to be done, how much damage there's been to the scroll.
So-
But yeah, it's not too labor intensive.
Do some people have a reputation for doing the whole thing with no mistakes first run?
The job title is called a sofer. So the Hebrew scribe is a sofer. My wife is a soferet. She has done this kind of repair work, and she has talked glowingly about how when she does this kind of work, she feels like God is working through her. God God's voice is passing through her quill as she's writing the letters on the scroll. It's a very powerful spiritual practice.
Right, but do some people have a reputation for from Genesis to Exodus or whatever of not making any mistakes?
The job is to do it without making mistakes, but it's very labor intensive. As I mentioned, it takes about a year to write the entire Torah out. Okay, Jean, go ahead.
So the other books, like the prophets and Psalms and all that, are those on scrolls or are they just in book form?
Originally, they were on scrolls. And so if we think pre-Gutenberg Bible, originally we just had a collection of bound books. The binding of books probably happens 1,000 years before the Gutenberg Bible, when the Romans begin binding some of this stuff. It's a little bit easier to carry bound books than scrolls rolled up. But the tradition of keeping things scrolled stays with specifically the Torah and then the 5 Megillot, or the 5 scrolls. And that is the book of Esther, the book of Jonah, the book of Ruth, Song of Songs, and Kohelet. These are the 5 scrolls that accompany the Torah scroll that are often read in scroll form commonly. Okay. Now what I want to do is I'm going to ask Ezra to share a text sheet that I prepared, and it's got a couple highlights from each of the 5 books. I'm going to walk through a quick review of these highlights, and then we'll break you off into breakout groups where you can talk about which of these texts are meaningful to you. Okay, so there you see our first set of texts. And the first text that I want to say is perhaps one of the most important texts in the entire Torah, is this from chapter 1, verse 27. So God created human in God's own image. In the image of God, God created them. Male and female, he created them. So here, where my cursor is going, B'Tselem Elohim, right? So Ezra, if you could highlight B'Tselem Elohim, either in Hebrew or in the translation, in the image of God. That means every human being walking on the planet Earth is created in God's image. You are created in God's image. You are perfect as you are, divinely thought of and needed to be as part of God's image. I just find that the Reform movement has dedicated itself to this idea of equality, that we therefore have to celebrate all of humanity. The Jews are nice, but when we're talking about holiness, every human being can access holiness. Okay, the next text I'm going to have us focus on is from chapter 12, verse 1. And there I bolded the Hebrew for us. I'll just read the Hebrew and then I'll do the translation. Vayomer Adonai el Avram, and God spoke to Avram Lech lecha. The Lord said to Abraham, go. Go for your sake. From your country, from your family, from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. This is the story of spiritual journeys, right? Like Abraham and Sarah, they are setting out to somehow follow this idea and somehow make meaning of this God idea. And they're not young chickens when this is happening. The text says they're 65 and 60 years old. They're setting out late in life, hoping to have children, but still saying, hey, this is something we have to do. We're not done living our lives yet. I'm always inspired by this idea, lech lecha. The Hebrew phrase here means don't only go, go lech lecha, go Avram, for your benefit, for your well-being, go. So from that idea of taking a spiritual journey, we are all trying to figure out what the next step is. And in a pandemic, right, we're all trying to make sense of what this next step in the journey is because of the insanity of pandemic living. Ezra, if you could scroll up for the couple of texts about Exodus. So the stories of Genesis are about our patriarchs and matriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah. We leave off with the last one, which is Joseph and his wife and their kids. They go down to Egypt. Exodus begins with the story moving from the land of Israel down to Egypt, because Joseph and his family have become unknown to the Pharaoh. The text says that a Pharaoh rises up who doesn't know Joseph. And they're afraid of these Israelites, and so they enslave them. Moses is born in that opening chapter of Exodus as kind of a savior for these oppressed people. And so when Moses is a shepherd out in the wilderness, he comes across a burning bush. And the text I'm going to highlight for us is this burning bush moment. And here the text in chapter 3, verse 14, God says to Moses, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. Most translations don't even translate this phrase. They just say the Hebrew words, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. If we have to translate it, we could translate it kind of like Popeye, I am that I am. And I want to now take you on a deeper journey into this, because this four-letter name of God, Aleph Hey Yud Hey, and the corresponding Yud Hey Vav Hey, which is God's Hebrew name in the book of Exodus, is not a noun, it's a verb. So when Hebrew readers read that bolded phrase, they don't read God's as a noun, a cup, a chair, a table. God's name is a verb, I will be. It's a form of be, is, was, will be. We don't often think of God as a verb or as an idea of a verbal idea about beingness. But thinking about God as a verb, as the verb of being, might go to the essence of what this phrase, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, means. Moses will lead the Israelites out of slavery, and we'll celebrate that at the Passover holiday every year. As they leave slavery, Moses takes them to Mount Sinai, and there at Mount Sinai, we read the 10 Commandments. This happened yesterday in synagogue. Every Jewish community that had services this past Friday or Saturday read this text, which is from chapter 20, verse 2. This is from the beginning of the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. So we can say that Exodus is predicated on these two moments And what happens in the book of Exodus is the birth of a nation, the birth of a people, that through the waters of the splitting of the Sea of Reeds, the Israelites are born. And so this becomes a book of no longer Abraham's journey, but now the collective, the Israelite journey. And the other thing I want to say about this moment at Mount Sinai is that all the people witnessed this. And I want you to really pay attention to this next sentence that I'm going to say, because it's a bit unusual. Every religious tradition has the idea of a prophet communicating with God. But the only religious tradition that dares to say all the people communicated with God is here at this moment. Right? So it's not just Moses, the prophet, talking to God. But when the 10 commandments are delivered, all the Israelites were at Mount Sinai witnessing this prophetic moment. That's unique. Doesn't happen in any other spiritual practice, any other spiritual tradition except Judaism. Okay. Ezra, if you could move us down to the third book of the Hebrew Bible, Leviticus. This is the book of laws, Levites. It's the book of sacrifices. We'll get into the sacrifices next week a little bit. But the middle of the book of Leviticus has perhaps an addendum to the 10 commandments. It starts chapter 19 with restating some of the 10 commandments and adding in a couple other thoughts. And then it adds this most important verse. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. And we can begin to say that maybe this book that's referred to as the Holiness Code, this chapter 19 of Leviticus, is coming in to teach us more than the 10 commandments. It's coming in to think about how challenging it is to love anyone else besides yourself. And how hard it is to remember that to be in relationship with others is also a path of holiness. Okay. Ezra, if you could move us down to Numbers. So the book of Numbers takes the journey from Mount Sinai, and they begin the 40 years of wandering. And the text I'm going to share from you from Numbers is the priestly blessing. So Ezra, stop the share for a second. I'm going to ask you to look at my hands on my screen. All right, this is the famous Klingon blessing that Spock gives. This is the priestly blessing, right? Spock is getting that from the priestly blessing. And so this is how the priests would bless. They would place it on their heads of their kids. I do this to Gabriel on Friday nights, but then they would offer up the words. And so Ezra, I'm going to ask you now if you could share the word so we can read that through one more time. And it's these 3 lines from Numbers. May God bless you and keep you. May God make God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God lift countenance upon you and give you peace. This is called the priestly blessing. This is the blessing that Aaron would deliver to the Israelites to bestow blessing upon them. This is a unique and beautiful way to bring this idea that God is present with us in a variety of different ways. Okay. So now we're going to wrap this up with Deuteronomy. And Ezra, if you could scroll up to these 3 teachings from Deuteronomy. This first teaching is simply called the Shema. This is the central prayer that, that is in every Jewish prayer service. We recite this prayer twice a day. This is not really a prayer, it's a statement. And if we can say anything about what do Jews actually believe in, if they're atheists and agnostic and liberal and traditional, the one thing we could stereotype and say is Jews do believe this next sentence. So here's the sentence. Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That is what Jews believe in. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Listen, Israel, God is one. And then the next line, Ve'ahavta Adonai et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. So this teaching early on in Deuteronomy is a central piece of our liturgy to this day. The next text that comes up to us is from chapter 16, verse 20. And this is the text that demands justice. So if being created in the image of God, loving your neighbor are the two cornerstones of the Torah, this I'm going to say is the third cornerstone, the pursuit of justice. Justice, only justice shall you pursue, that you may live and inherit the land which the Lord your God gives you. Tzedek, tzedek, tadov. You must pursue justice. Okay. The final text I'm going to offer up for our study before you're going to break off into chavruta or study groups is this one from chapter 30 towards the end. And this is called Lo Bashamayim. It's not in heaven that you should say, who shall go up for us to heaven and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who shall go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. We no longer need Moses at this moment. Moses is ready to die in the next couple chapters, and we can get along without Moses just fine. We don't need a prophet to discern God's word any longer. It's now in our hearts. It's in our hands. We can do this on our own. Okay. So I'm going to ask us to come back together. And so what I'd like you to do is you're going to have a few minutes to talk about this in groups of, let's do threes where we can, Ezra. And just share like which of these spoke to you and why. You're going to have 5 minutes in groups. Let's 4 minutes. You have 4 minutes in groups. And Ezra and I will kind of bounce into the room for a few seconds to make you have any questions. But Ezra, if you could set us up in various breakout rooms, and then you can kind of go through these and say which ones are important to you.
I would suggest not putting all three Hess images here together.
Yeah, no, we'll do what we can. Ezra, I'll go into the first, let's see, we've got 8 rooms. I'll go into 1 through 4. You can take 5 through 8.
Sounds good.
Great, thank you.
Be a button for you to press that will take you to the breakout room.
Not working.
Fascinating. Let's see if I can help you with that. Oh, there you go. Nope. Let's see if I can help you with that. If I move you to a different room. Working now?
Doesn't seem to want to work. So join. Don't have my mouse. I'm just using the tracking device. Let me get my mouse. on faith.
Yeah.
It was very hard for me to do.
To finish my sentence to my group, I liked all of them.
That was a good way to finish that.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. Len, why do I get the feeling you were doing a lot of the talking in your group?
Because I'm shy.
Yeah, we know.
And quiet.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. Good to see everyone. Thank you for going through the study process. This kind of small group study is called Chavruta, or partner learning. And we're going to try and do this every week to just spend some time, getting out of my perspective, or even Ezra's perspective, and into your own thoughts, so that you can be sharing stuff. And I do also think that when we can be learning together, we can see, oh, other folks have similar ideas to mine, but they're not quite the same. And we can just kind of orient ourselves to figure out where we're landing in our different perspectives. Ezra, anything that you noticed in your tour of the breakout rooms that you wanted to highlight for us?
I think what I want to highlight is the fact that a lot of people agreed on some of favorite verses with entirely different reasons for why. Everyone was able to bring their own interpretation. A lot of people, I heard a lot of discussion about B'Tselem Elohim and being made in the image of God, and why that was important to different people for completely different reasons.
Very nice. Yeah, and I think all of a sudden, from Ezra's point, what we can begin to see is that there's a very popular idea that there can be multiple same verse. Ezra could read one part of the verse and fall in love with that section. I could fall in love with a different piece, and we could have actually slightly different readings with slightly different agendas of why that phrase or that verse speaks to us. Doesn't mean that one of us is right and one of us wrong. It just means that from different perspectives, we can begin to learn something new about the verse itself and how we can connect to it. And so this is a way to kind of uphold the idea in the Talmud that the Torah has 70 faces of God, that we turn it and turn it and turn it, and every time we turn it, we see something new. We find a new path of holiness that we didn't see before, and we can fall in love with it. I can honestly say, as someone who's been teaching Torah for 20 years, that every time I intersect with the Torah, I find something new that I have never found before. And that's exciting, right? That means I'm challenging myself to always find some new idea, a new angle, a new connection. Any quick questions or comments about the verses that we just studied together while we're talking about them? Okay. Terry, I'm sorry, Steve, I see a hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I brought it up in this discussion about, you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, the screen went off. But anyway, the discussion about in the image of God. And if somebody looks, and I've thought about this over the years, and I brought it up in the discussion group, if religion can be considered divisive and not good for people because it's tribalism and it's created so many wars over time. So maybe that's a beginning place to have discussion with other groups, but how do you view that? How does Judaism look at that?
Yeah, so the way I understand your question, Steve, which is a really important one about the difference between universalism and particularism. On one hand, we can see that verse, B'Tselem Elohim, as a universalistic text, that every human being is created in the image of God. And so from that universalizing perspective, we can imagine this text applying to every person, whether they're religious or not religious. And we could also say that there are aspects of Judaism that are very particularistic, very tribal. And we can even, go to the place of the chosen people question that Amy was raising. I don't want to go there yet, but I do think that we're all kind of on the spectrum of, some of us are thinking about Judaism from a very universalistic perspective. Others of us are thinking about Judaism from a very particularistic perspective. And some of us are kind of flexible and moving back and forth. It's a kind of an inelegant way of saying there's no only one way of reading. And some people prefer a more universalistic approach. Some people prefer a more particularistic approach. We can even begin to think that secular folks, liberal folks might prefer the universalistic ideas, and the more traditional Orthodox folks might prefer the more particularistic ideas, and that might play itself out sometimes as a truism. Other questions about verses that came up for you that you want to chat about for a minute? Okay. Then what I'm going to ask us to do now is move from this specific idea of these texts, because I think they're all quite beautiful, to a broader Q&A of the concept of Torah and teaching. And so I want to return to the word for a minute before we open up to just a general Q&A. The Hebrew word Torah means pointing or directing or teaching. And so often the word Torah is translated as teaching, which means that when we use the word Torah, we can refer to the 5 books of Moses, but we can then extrapolate it out and say any teaching that is meaningful to Jewish folks can be thought of as a form of Torah. So it's not only the 5 books of Moses, but the teachings of the rabbis that come at the time of Jesus are considered a second Torah, an oral Torah. If the 5 books of Moses are the written Torah, the words of the rabbis become an oral commentary on that written Torah. The people who study the 5 books of Moses and the words of the rabbis, meaning us, we get to figure out how we understand these different teachings. And when we come up with new insights, new aha moments, we can say, hey, we have a new Torah to teach. And here's my Torah that I want to share with you. And so therefore, Torah is not frozen in time. It's not only the 5 books of Moses, but this more expansive definition of Torah can apply to any teaching, any wisdom, any insights that are gleaned from this process of learning. The word Torah also can mean law. And so we know that Judaism is often understood as a legalistic religion. Similar, Islam is also understood as a legalistic religion, that the law codes that hold these communities together are very much the norms, the expectations, the rules that kind of guide these different groups. And living in modern times now, postmodern times, we like breaking rules. We like bending them and reinventing them and seeing how we can make sense of it ourselves. And we do know that part of Jewish identity is structured around this legal system. As a Reformed synagogue, myself as a Reconstructionist rabbi working in a Reformed synagogue, I engage with my relationship to the tradition through a variety of specific ideas that I'll be sharing in other lessons about my great-grandfather, who is an Orthodox Jew, and how he taught me how to pray as a Jew. And I still want to live in a modern world and understand how I can take these wisdom pieces from my tradition and make sense to them for my son who's 10 years old, and how he can then take Judaism and make it meaningful in his life. So there's an idea of lineage, that we're going back in time to our ancestors, and we're going forward in time through my son to the next generation. And that part of this is I then become a link in this chain. And I notice what it's like to feel like a link in this chain, and to teach my son about his grandparents and great-grandparents who might have been born in a different country under different circumstances. And then maybe he can teach his grandchildren and great-grandchildren about these great-grandparents. And all of a sudden, we have this idea that we are not bound by the lives of our own days on this earth. But when I'm teaching my great-grandfather's wisdom, son, my great-grandfather was born in 1889. He died in 1970. But by invoking his memory, I'm keeping him alive. By teaching my son about his importance to our family, my son is learning about how to keep his memory alive as well. And all of a sudden that becomes part of Jewish identity. Amy, I see your hand. Go ahead.
So, part of living in the modern world is that many of us live in interfaith families. And one of the things that means, for better or worse, is that many of us who identify ourselves as Jews end up with grandchildren, maybe children, but certainly grandchildren, that are raising their children not as Jews. And I don't necessarily need for you to answer this question now, but I'm wondering if, as we go through this class, if you could address that a little bit about how we can, as modern Jews, what is appropriate and how can one think about giving to a non-Jewish grandchild. This is an issue for me. Some of the important essence of my background, so that she ends up feeling some connectedness to this tradition that you were just talking about being passed down from generation to generation unto the generations, when she's not being raised as a Jew.
It's a great question. And Amy, it's something that we'll touch on in our life cycle section about weddings and when do we think about the next generation in specific ways. And I do think for me, the way I resonate with your question is I get to speak my truth about my experience in my life to not just my son, but let's say my son's friends and to the next generation, and teach them about what is valuable to me. And I often tell them, these are the traditions I'm embracing. These are the ways I'm making meaning out of this. And so I kind of feel like a waiter, that the waiter offers you a variety of desserts that could tempt you, but you have to choose which dessert to pluck off the tray. And so I kind of often feel like I'm the waiter saying, here, I've got a variety of yummy treats. Ultimately, it's your choice. And so it's a very interesting question with no clear sets of like, where do we go with this? But I do think the Jewish path is the path I have rededicated my life to. And so often I answer that from a Jewish only lens. And as a meditation teacher who's taught meditation to Jews and non-Jews, I can say that spirituality itself is a noble path that brings people closer to their own truth, to living their own best self. And so from that lens of how are we trying to become the best people we can be, that's where I choose Judaism, right? Judaism teaches me how to become the best Rabbi Michael Ross I can be. And so I lean heavily, especially when the world's a mess, when our country is a mess, when our community is a mess, right? We got all kinds of messes that we can, try and navigate. When the world is a mess, I go to Shabbat. I celebrate the Jewish Sabbath. When the world's a mess, I open the Torah and I find wisdom, because Jews know pandemics come and go. We're going to survive this pandemic. We'll be just fine. We know we have survived other pandemics, and it's nasty and terrible, and it's going to be chaotic, and the Jewish community will continue on. So I think part of this is just finding a way to get anchored in my own spiritual process. And when I can teach from that place of groundedness and centeredness, I think students, or in this case, Gabriel, my son, can understand that this is a valuable piece. But ultimately, I put it out on the tray, and Gabriel will have to figure out if he's going to take from the tray or not. Okay. Yeah. Well said, Jody. Jewish ethics are a towering resource, and they help guide us. I want to open this up to your questions as well. So we've got about 7 more minutes, and we've covered a lot of ground. If you have other questions about our topic or other topics, this can be just a general Q&A, and I can kind of field those questions for a few minutes. And this is how we're going to end each session. We'll have about 10 to 15 minutes each week to kind of explore your questions. So other comments or questions about what we've brought up today? Len, go ahead.
Just to quickly, I came in a little bit late. I saw some of the syllabus, and I'm wondering if you're sharing that file, because I don't think I have one.
Yeah, we all got that attached in an email. So when you got the Zoom link, attached to that email was the syllabus. And what I can do is I will send out the syllabus in this week's email again. So if you're having a hard time locating it, when we send out the update for the week, we'll send out another copy of the syllabus link so that everyone's got it. Other questions, comments, thoughts as we wrap this up today? Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, mechanistic, only because I have a cousin who is mildly Jewish, but they are hardcore vegan. It just came to me that they wouldn't touch a Torah.
Right.
So how do you respond to them?
It's a great question. There's a new kind of criticism about some aspects of Jewish practice, because we have a variety of things that we use that are made from animal skin, not just the Torah, but I have the tefillin that I put on my head and my arm, which are made from animal products. There is a new thought that you could make the tefillin from other ingredients that are natural. And so people are trying to figure out if a vegan tefillin could be made from, I don't know, grape leaves or something. It's not my concern. I'm not worried about this. I don't think we've got a way to make a vegan Torah scroll. And so I think kind of like how we deal with Native Americans in this country, we have to say, all right, these folks are doing this. They're trying to be respectful of the animals. They're trying to use the animal not as an object, but as a source. And so I'm completely comfortable using leather as a way to take over the holiness of the writing of the Torah. But I think that it's an argument that vegans would object. And I could say, all right, you can object. You can buy a book instead. You don't have to, touch the leather scroll. If you can buy a bound book and use that instead. Other comments? Len, go ahead.
A comment on the last question, and then 2 questions. First of all, if they found a way of making a vegan Torah, would it be the Impossible Torah?
Probably.
Okay. I'm wondering on the hierarchy of writings, where the peak of vote might appear. Haven't looked at that in about 20 years, 25 years since Rabbi Abrams in our synagogue was teaching from it.
So Pirkei Avot is a small section of the rabbinic text. It is written in the Mishnah. And when we get to the rabbinic text, we'll see the layer, and we'll do a bit of Pirkei Avot study when we get to our section on rabbinic civilization and rabbinic text. That comes when we're also studying about the life of Jesus, because the rabbis and Jesus are contemporaries. And so Pirkei Avot, therefore, is not from the Torah whatsoever. It's one of the early layers of the rabbinic texts.
Good news.
Other questions, other comments for
Just
tonight?
a comment. I have good news. I forgot my second question.
Okay. Okay, let's go over the reading then. So you get your first reading assignment this week. The reading for this week was from Essential Judaism, as I call it the syllabus. I'll kind of share it with you so that we can read through this together. Share screens here. So you can certainly go over these pages, chapter 5, the Torah comes first, reading the book. I'm going to double check the page numbers to make sure that they're correct, but these are sections in chapter 5. Next week, we're going to move from the Torah to the rest of the Hebrew Bible. So if you want to just spend this week reading through chapter 5, that would be great. And then in weeks to come, we'll move from Essential Judaism to the other books as needed. The goal with the reading is to make this bite-sized and doable. So I try and give you a reading assignment each week that's about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. If you want to read more, you can. As college students know, they often get these kinds of reading assignments where if you go deeper in, you can read for an hour or two. I will try and keep it under an hour, but there'll often be more optional secondary readings besides the primary readings. And as we get into the class, you'll be welcome to do as much or as little as you want. We're never going to be tested on the readings. The readings kind of serve as nutrients and background music for the class. Sometimes questions will come out of the readings though. And when you have questions from the readings, you're always welcome to bring them into our sessions. Okay, Len, wrap it up for us today. Final question.
Just when you cite a reading under a date, is that the reading for the following week? Or is that for that? It's
I
mentioned?
think the weirdness for this week is that I didn't give you homework before the first class. So the reading for this week was for this topic. So typically it's for the week ahead. And so
We're up
primarily,
to the second reading now for the next week.
exactly. And you can see the second reading combines the first reading. And so it's doable. You could do
Thank you.
both. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for joining us. This was delightful to come together as a group. And then just a couple bits of reminders. If you have questions that crop up, shoot me or Ezra an email. Ezra, do you want to give them a quick instruction about putting together a group chat?
Of course. So one of the things that I'm going to send an email out about either tonight or tomorrow is just creating a group chat for questions for outside of this synchronous time, able to discuss the reading and the learning. Usually we do those on GroupMe. Is there any preference between GroupMe or a different service? Are you all comfortable with using GroupMe? I will just email you a link and you will click it and it will automatically join the chat for you.
I personally have never done any of that, so I'll just wing it.
I will send step-by-step guidance. I have full faith in all of your ability to figure it out.
Thank you.
Same for me.
So folks are invited into the group chat as they want. And it is, as Ezra was saying, a terrific way to keep the conversation going when thoughts crop up and you want to share with your classmates a question or a thought. The group chats are very, very helpful in developing those conversations. Okay, thank you for being part of this very exciting first class. I look forward to doing that. Next week will be on Zoom as well. One thought as I'm wrapping this up, I think once we go back to in-person options, I might slide the timing of this class forward to 4 o'clock instead of 4:30, just so that I can be home and have dinner with my family. So what I want to talk about next Sunday is if we, in future weeks, week 3, 4, 5, move to 4 o'clock, if that would work for the overwhelming majority of us. We don't have to make any decisions today.
Sure.
But I will bid everyone a good evening. Have a wonderful week. Oh, one quick one. This Friday is a special Tu B'Shvat celebration. If you ever want to join Temple Beth Shalom, you can go to tbshudson.org. And I will always in the weekly emails kind of say, hey, this is happening at Temple Beth Shalom. If you want to celebrate Tu B'Shvat, the New Year of the Trees, join us. So those invitations will be coming your way as well. Have a great week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank
Stay
you. Rebecca.
healthy.
That's awesome. Bye.
Stay
welcome.
healthy.
Okay, Ezra, thank you. I think that went pretty well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that went well indeed.
I will share with you in a moment.